episode 176 Timelines and episode 77 WP-Tonic. Today on Timelines, Jonathan Denwood and I are co-netcasting WP-Tonic and Timelines with special guest Anca Mosoiu. I probably murdered that name, but it's Romanian. Anyway, she's from Oakland, California. Anca is a programmer and consultant who helps customers build tools to run their businesses more efficiently, which we all need in this business. It's so hard to do. Yeah. And today, since it's WP-Tonic, she's going to focus in on the REST API. So for my Timelines friends, we're going to go a little tech today, but you know what? Go on over to WP-Tonic and look at all the show notes. That's WPTonic.com. And you need to learn this stuff. You need to understand it. So when you hire these high-end programmers and developers, you know exactly what you're getting. Don't be like our friend who spent $34,000 and doesn't have anything. You know who I'm talking about, right?
I do, Bill.
All right. Today. So, and that's on the business side. You know, I've been doing WordPress for a couple of years, so I do the business approach. I'm not bad at the base WordPress, but I know when I need help.
Great. Well, lovely having you on the show, Anca. I've been really looking forward to this chat. So we're going to go a little bit techy in this part of the episode. So we're here to talk about the RESTless API. So what are some of the key things that you think that we need to talk about and know about it, Anca?
Well, I think that when we're talking about the WordPress API, there's a couple of things that that this enables. And one of those is the ability for people to use their data from WordPress without using a WordPress front end, which I think is a really big thing that we can talk about. And the other thing that we should talk about is what Matt Mullenweg said at the State of the Word in December around JavaScript being something that a lot of WordPress developers need to become more familiar with. So we can address both of those things. And if you're interested in talking more from a business perspective as to why the WordPress API is such a big deal and what some of the benefits are, I'm definitely interested in talking about that as well. So
yeah, it sounds great. Shall we start off about the how the does the RESTless API really is connected to what Matt said about WordPress developers really having to learn JavaScript? Are they kind of really linked?
It is and it isn't. So you can definitely use the WordPress API. I'll go back a little bit and explain a little bit about what it is. So what the WordPress REST API does is it allows applications, websites to access WordPress data through something that's called an endpoint, which means that you could go to a URL and something like a post or a product from a WooCommerce website or something like that, and you can get the data for that in a way that another application can use. So you get this nice little description of the content, the post title, the post content, so the metadata, stuff like that you can then use in an application. And this is interesting because it was not part of the WordPress core previously. So it was one of these features that was built initially as a plugin. So what this means is that several people had some ideas about how this might work, and Ryan McHugh, who's the developer of the plugin that was eventually rolled into core, built something that works better from the perspective of the other developers working on core. And so over about a year and a half, he's been working on this for about 2 years, over the last year, so since WordPress 4.3, the core development team has been working on putting this into the WordPress core. So you don't have to install anything additional, and there won't be any major changes happening to the architecture of this plugin, which means that there's now a standard way for applications that are not WordPress. So they're not PHP, they're not written on top of the WordPress template tags, to use the data that's inside WordPress.
Yeah, am I correct in saying it's using JSON, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
And I had the misfortune of having, when I was actively developing, I was involved with some SOAP application work, which literally I wanted to blow my brains out. So JSON is a much better choice, isn't it?
Well, yeah, JSON is sort of the human readable version of XML. XML, which was really popular around the turn of the century, and it's so awesome that we can say that now, the turn of the century, was really a good way for programs to exchange information. But it turns out that it was a little overcomplicated. I mean, there's certain rules and constraints and things, and you can't push something that's an invalid object and all of this stuff, which is great, but makes development much more time-consuming and problematic. And so JSON is this very simple, like, you could write JSON, it'd be very easy. And everybody who uses it has a much easier time understanding like what this data is that's coming across. You don't have to parse through a bunch of XML, and if you screw up a slash, you're not going to break your whole file. So I think it's really, the fact that the interface is JSON is also very significant because it's much more friendly to developers and anybody that's just trying to look at what's going on inside WordPress.
Yeah, the side that interested me, but I don't know, and we had a preliminary quick discussion about this, Anca, didn't we? Was how WordPress in the next couple of months is going to be much more mobile for full stack developers who are looking to build a website with a back-end, a database, and then link it to a mobile application. The possibility of using WordPress in what I've just described because of these developments has become much more, or will become much more attractive. So do you agree with that outline, and can you give us some more information about that?
Well, so one of the things that as an application developer you have to do is you have to build an administration area for your stuff. So if you're doing a real estate website, or if you're building an application like even Uber or anything like that, you have to enter a whole bunch of data into your application for it to be usable by people on the front end. So if you're building an app, you have to build two things. You have to build the thing that your customers interact with, and you have to build the thing that your administrators have to use to administer this application, this website. So on the WordPress side, the fact that the WordPress admin interface can now be used to create things that are not WordPress is really, really huge. Millions and millions of people are very familiar with this concept of logging into WordPress and editing content and posts and custom post types and options and things like that. So you're going to save a huge amount of money when you're building your application if your admins can use WordPress to create the content, to administer users, to do that kind of stuff. So it means that on the front end, you're going to build something where you're going to cut your costs of development significantly. So you can still build very robust, scalable applications that you can deploy on mobile devices that work well with the chosen JavaScript framework of your choice, and you're basically saving a huge amount of time where you don't have to build all of the admin features. So yeah, that's huge. I don't know. I don't have numbers to figure out how much it costs to build an app.
Let's just quickly see if I've got this. I've got the right pitch here. This is how I kind of see it, and you're the expert. I see with the RESTless API, you could take data out of the WordPress database and pass it over into a format that other languages easily can deal with, which is JSON. So you could move that. Then you could utilize a kind of JavaScript library that produces code that will work on the iPhone and on the Android system without having to rewrite it either in Java or the Apple OS operating language. I think the new one is Swift, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is supposed to be a little bit more friendly than the previous Cocoa kind of C+, C-, whatever it was. So basically what you're attempting to use, you're utilizing the WordPress database, the back-end system, you're passing it out as JSON, which is pretty well known, and then you're using JavaScript to build apps that can run on two operating systems. So, and by being able to do that, you cut back the development costs considerably.
Yeah. The Calypso application, which was released on WordPress.com is a great example of that. So that's a JavaScript application written in a framework called React that allows you to edit and manage your WordPress.com websites on whatever device you happen to be using. So it's not perfect. It's the first time that it was released, but it's a great demonstration of how you can build something that you can take with you anywhere. I've installed it locally on my computer, and I can now use Calypso to update my WordPress.com website, to create new content, to manage a bunch of things. So it's really, we're just in the first early months of seeing these kinds of applications coming with a WordPress backend.
Yeah, and I'll be correct if this doesn't pan out the way that I suggested in the next 18 months. At the present moment, if you're going to build a mobile application and a website and have an interface behind both, you're normally probably looking at either Ruby on Rails, or you're looking at one of the JavaScript libraries that are purposely designed for applications. We're gonna leave you the viewers just waiting for the reply to that, because we're going to have to go over and have a break.
Okay.
Okay, we are back from the break, and I can't even start to ask that tech question that Jonathan asked before the break. I tried to figure out exactly what he was talking about, but I'm going to ask him to ask it again, real short and concise. Then we'll go on after that, and we'll talk about Anca's business and success principles.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the precise, but I have a go, Bill. What I was saying, Anca, is that without what we just discussed really panning out, at the present moment, if you were trying to build a website with a joint back-end interface and also application, basically at the present moment, you would either do it in Ruby on Rails, or you would utilize one of the new JavaScript libraries that's been purposely designed to help back-end development and front-end. Would that be about right?
That would be a definite option. I mean, any of the traditional server-side construction tools would work. I mean, there's still people building stuff in Java. No, I know. It's like, whoa. But it depends actually on where you're going to be deploying this application, because there's a lot of people doing applications built on top of systems like Drupal, which is another content management framework, or even Python. So,
can I ask you a quick question about Drupal?
Yeah.
Is that, because I know nothing about Drupal, I'm a total WordPress junkie. You've got a lot more experience of programming and different systems. At the present moment, does Drupal do what WordPress is looking to do with the REST API? Can that already do what we've just discussed?
I don't know if Drupal has a JSON REST-based API, or if that's something that's an add-on. But I mean, yeah, I don't know for sure. I don't know the answer to that question, so I'm not going to try to guess on air.
No, I just thought I'd ask it, because I thought maybe that's one of the reasons why people are looking at it. My only other experience of a content management system is the Expression Engine. And I have, it's been over 2 years since the last one I built, but at that time that didn't have, to my knowledge, that kind of system. So are you pretty excited about what's coming up in the next year then?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do a lot of work with like enterprise type clients, larger corporate environments, or higher or scientific organizations. And what we're really trying to do is connect up a whole bunch of different WordPress installs. So for example, I work with the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, where they have all of these scientific experiments going, and scientists are working in multiple departments, and their information is being published on multiple websites by their PR people. And so what we're trying to do is collect a lot of this information in one place, while also allowing publishers control of their websites. So through the REST API, we can go out and poll all of these different sites and grab, for example, new scientific publications, or scientific results, or news items, or profile information. And we can then share them across multiple websites, multiple WordPress websites. And because the data model is the same on one end as well as the other, it's just much easier to do this communication. I'm also working with another client where we've built a conference management system on top of WordPress. And we wrote our own kind of API that allowed people to build mobile apps. Well, now that we have the WordPress REST API, instead of just that little part that we create an API for, we can allow our new application, which is going to be written 100% JavaScript, to access everything on the website. So
that sounds great. I think we're going to go over to my co-host now.
Yeah,
we've got some kind of more business kind of questions for you, Anca, and then we'll go on after we go on to the YouTube part where we have even more of a techie feast.
Great.
Before we go to your break, though, we're going to talk real fast since this is also timelines. Timeliners always want to know how you run your business and what you do for folks, but we want to know about your 3 life and success and leadership principles. And let me just name those, and then I'm going to come back and ask one business tech question.
Okay.
So the first one you had was always ask why. What does that mean to you?
Well, what it means to me is that when somebody comes to me and says, I'm trying to do this thing, I say, oh, really? Well, why are you doing this? What kind of results are you hoping to get? And it's a thing that as a technical person, like usually you're like supposed to provide answers. So if somebody comes in and says, I have this problem, you're like, well, you should install Apple or something. I've made enough mistakes now that I can, instead of saying that, it's like, well, what are you trying to do? Why are you doing this? Maybe there's a better solution than, something someone's told you to do.
Yeah, the why is so important. And you start out right with why, and that's excellent. So lead by example.
So there, I think I do a lot of coaching and a lot of education. And so in that scenario, I don't mind going out there and being stupid. Like, oh, I don't know how to do this. Well, I'm going to make a bunch of mistakes and oh, look, I've learned something. And I feel like a lot of people feel they're afraid to make mistakes. And so I'm just, okay, I'll try it. I push this button. If it breaks, okay, we'll figure it out. Why did that happen? So in that sense, I try to model the behavior for people who I helped of just, trying things, and then instead of being afraid, make the decision and go forward.
Yeah, to get over their fear. That's very good.
Yep.
Those are excellent 3 elements to form your business and your relationships around different folks. I could go on and on. I'd like to ask you about Lawrence Livermore Labs. I actually did some projects there, and I led research teams for the military. So yeah. I'm not gonna go off into that rabbit hole. That's an interesting place. You live in a great Oakland. You can reach so much technology from where you live in Oakland, not across the bay. It's a beautiful place to live. Okay, here's the business question. A couple of business questions. First of all, let's say I'm a business guy. I'm smart enough to know that I've learned the basics of WordPress. My company probably has a budget of about $10,000 to spend on their website development, as well as their hosting and services. But I need to know the basics. And I'm a kind of guy. I'm kind of a business guy who wants to get in and learn things. Where should I put once I got the basics of WordPress down and the concepts? Where should I focus my time if I want to learn? Should I focus on CSS, or should I go into JavaScript right now?
Well, okay. So
should I go back and look at HTML more?
What are you trying to do exactly? Are you trying to, manage your website or manage your business?
I think it's just good to understand or know. I'm still managing the business. It's just I'm all design build engineer, civil engineer, design build. I've been in AutoCAD for 25 years running a business. And it's different kind of folks at different levels. I think everyone needs to know the basics of WordPress. Yeah. But an engineer or somebody to work in scientific research sometimes wants to understand and get into the backside. Not that they want to do it. They just want to put the logic in their mind, so when they're talking to the experts they hire, they can relate better going back and forth between their board of directors or whatever it might be. $10,000 for a mid-sized company, maybe 10 to 15 is what you're going to spend at least on a good WordPress site these days.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, so it really depends on kind of what you want your website to do. So if you're primarily using this as a marketing site and you're building landing pages and you're, getting people's contacts, then knowing some HTML is absolutely helpful, because then you can build better landing pages. If you learn CSS, you can make them look a little bit better. And if you're strapped and you need to make sure that there's like the right stuff on your homepage, that may be what it comes down to. You just got to go and hack some HTML together.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Would you agree that if you're dealing with that type of individual, which Bill, that maybe Genesis is a good, because you've got the hooks and filters, and you can do quite a bit with the layout, which is still a bit more techy, but without you having to try and learn to become a full back-end developer coder. What do you think?
Well, I love Genesis. It's the framework that I use on almost every website. And I think that it provides a really good abstract simple yet simple way of thinking about how a website gets generated. So, I mean, if you're as a business person want to rearrange your website or redesign your homepage, my first instinct would be to say, you probably shouldn't be doing that. But, if you do need to do that, like if you say, okay, this has 2 columns, but now we have 3 departments, so we need to add another column. Yeah, using something like Genesis is really, really helpful. It's got widgets that let you, put content in places on the website without having to know how to write PHP code or get into the, database backend. And so like those, finding a framework that is developer friendly is absolutely critical. And over the last 2 years, we've really switched all of the people that come through our support group, which we do every week. We have people coming in asking WordPress questions and we help them. And about half those people are now switching to Genesis because it's just easier to build a mental model of this website in your brain when you can touch all the knobs there. Whereas some other themes, you don't really get that choice, and so it's harder to understand what's happening behind the scenes. And yeah, I mean, I would say, use a framework like that. I think that there's kind of this, from a business perspective, there's this kind of desire, and it's a natural human thing to make something a technical problem when it's really not a technical problem. So, I mean, if you're running a business, would you all of a sudden decide, okay, I'm going to repaint my front door today? Or would you, hire somebody else to do that? Or would you say, okay, I'm going to go in and install a new toilet in the bathroom because it's busted? So you really have to think about what parts of your business you really need to get your hands dirty in. Too many business people turn their business into a technical problem because they don't understand how to either communicate with a developer, or they just have developers who don't know how to communicate with humans. That's a common problem. That's the third point there on my timeline. But you should think about it, because if you're trying to like rearrange your homepage as a business owner, the value that you get from relationships you manage with humans. Now, if you're doing 100% online business, the situation is going to be different. But if you are in an agency, or if you have people that are your clients, you're going to get better results from talking to those people and signing deals and selling them directly, rather than learning how to make a new homepage.
Jonathan, first of all, Jonathan, that was an excellent question about Genesis, and Anca, that was a great answer, and the follow-up answer was wonderful. I'll be using that cut in the front. That's the highlight cut right there.
Oh my God.
Good job, Jonathan. Good tying it together. We're going to go to a break. We're going to come back and find out how we can get in contact with Anca, and we're going to finish up the show with one last question. Okay, we are back for the break. This is the last break, and we finish up the last 5 or 6 minutes of the show. Anca, first of all, how does the listener get a hold of you, find you?
Great. Yeah. So I run a technology salon in Oakland, California. So you can find us online at Liminal, which is right here behind me.
Very good. I love that. Yeah.
There's an L.
Yep.
You can also find me on Twitter. I'm at Anca, so ANCA. Usually I check Twitter. You can email us at TechLiminal. We don't do any sort of online stuff. We do most of our WordPress training and work in person. I think that there's a huge amount of value to having people together in the same room. So we have a nice spot here in Oakland for that.
And you live in a big city, so you have a bigger population to draw from. So that's why you can get away with that. That's one of the problems when you get remote. You love to be remote in this online world, but then you miss that relationship. So very good. Jonathan, you're going to ask one last question, right?
Yeah, before I ask Anca, the final question, I just want to point out to people that Anca runs one of the most premium training centers in the Bay Area, and she has the highest reputation for ethics and the quality of her training and her team. And I think personally, what I've heard from anybody that's gone on her training courses, they are the most highest quality. So I thought I would just point that out. And to finish off, so you've got some exciting new training courses coming up, haven't you, I think? So can you give some idea, give us some little insights of what's coming up in your world around training?
Yeah, well, so this year we're going to focus a lot on helping people cross the bridge over to WordPress, or from WordPress to JavaScript. So I've teamed up with LearnTech Labs, which is a programming boot camp that teaches people how to program in JavaScript. So we're going to be co-teaching a class on the WordPress REST API. We're going to start with an introductory section in February. So if you go to our website, techliminal.com, on the homepage you can sign up, and we'll let you know when we open registration. We have to finalize a couple of scheduling details. And hopefully after that, we'll grow it a little bit bigger and help people actually build applications end to end. And
can I just ask a quick follow-through question? I'm actually interested in that myself, actually. But I have done a bit of JavaScript, but it was a few years ago, and I know my CS and my HTML, and I know a bit about a little bit of PHP. Do you think I could get anything from it?
Yes. So the way that we're going to structure that is the first it's going to be a 2-day workshop. So the first day is all WordPress. So where's the API? How do you access it? What does it look like? What does WordPress look like? So we're going to have some people who don't know WordPress. And then the second day, once you have a WordPress, we're going to write in JavaScript. And probably what we're going to do is we're going to do our training in jQuery, which is a very simple and accessible subset of JavaScript. But if we have people that are experienced in React or AngularJS, they can certainly work in that respect. The way that I do my trainings, and one of the reasons why it's really important to have it be in person, is that they're project-based workshops. So for example, last year, 3 weeks ago, we wrapped up a WooCommerce workshop where we had 5 people, each of whom built their WooCommerce website. And so, we started on the first day, here's WooCommerce, and then what are you going to build? And then the second day, everybody built their stuff. And so by the end, it wasn't like, you've done these 17.
Excellent.
That sounds really fantastic. What we're going to do, folks, now is we're going to come to the end of the podcast, but we will be having a further deep discussion with Anca and everything about the restless and other topics, and you'll be able to see that on the YouTube version of this show. So I would suggest that you go to our YouTube channel and watch more of us discussing tech deeply.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, you can go to WP-Tonic.com to find the show notes. Those will be the more detailed show notes, but also be up on Timelines. You'll be able to get the basic links and information at Timelines, but more detailed WP-Tonic. Thank you, Anca. Excellent discussion. I'm going to be running off, but I'll be listening to the show down at the Collective.
All right. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And see you. Good. Keep it going.
All right.
Okay, we got a couple minutes of silence so I can go back and edit for the iTunes. And I didn't tell folks in iTunes, just go over there and, give a review for WP-Tonic. I think there's about 60 there, and Timelines could always do for extra too. Hey, but Anca, one question before I leave and run off, and I'll be listening. I thought that was great what you just said about the WooCommerce and the training. I think there's really a need to do those shops and get people up fast, at that level. And I think you could go around and set that up ahead of people. I'm really looking, maybe come over to Reno or Sacramento, get 5 to 10 people together and do not just like WooCommerce, which is really a great tool, but let's say somebody wants a membership site, learn to do membership.
Yeah.
Those are tough WooCommerce membership. And not so much the online training. I think you just start out with membership because the online is another whole business. But
Well, we have a little group here of folks who get together every week. Like I said earlier, we have a WordPress support group that meets every single week on Wednesdays and on Fridays. And people in the group have built all kinds of different sort of sites, and that's how we set up some of these in-depth training. So membership sites is a great one. Working with Genesis is another one that a lot of people want. Just launching a blog, there's a lot of that sort of stuff that you can get online, but it's just better for many kinds of people if there's someone sitting there next to you and helping you. We do WooCommerce. We're going to do the WordPress API. We're also going to do things with plugin development, working with the WordPress database, reporting out of WordPress. How do you find out what's going on? I have a lot of ideas, and I would love to talk more with you about what your group might be interested in and help get those off the ground. Because
together over here in Reno, out in the desert side, and I'm in the nice Sierra side, and Jonathan's in Carson City. It's nice too. We're at the tree line, but over in the desert, people pull them in. So no, I think there's a need to go around and set up training. I think that sub-specialized training with people. I think that is very good. You can get up fast that way too. Yeah.
Well, it's much easier to retain knowledge when you're learning the knowledge, you're solving your problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so, maybe you should watch all these videos, but when you're actually figuring out how to take a picture of your shoes so that you can sell them on WooCommerce, and whether or not you need variants or something else, it's your thing, and it's so much more rewarding when you push the button and it works.
No, I agree. Yeah, especially for programmers and people working behind the scenes. And then you go into a business even, maybe they have 5 or 6 guys and gals in their tech area to come in. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, no, that's how I work. I go in, my clients, I'm a solo person. I go in and I coach them. So if they're developers and they're working on stuff, or they're business people and they're working on stuff, we try to do the things to the boundary of their knowledge, and then I help them get past that. And then they're building the thing. And then, I go off and do my own thing. But it's such a pleasurable and wonderful way to build things when you're really invested in working together with a team.
Yep. I'm going to recycle once, even though I'll be gone here, because I want to shoot out my 600 contacts to pay attention and start watching the show.
Okay.
So thank you. I'm out of here. So I'll cycle in and out just so I can bring it up. I won't say anything. We listen to the show. I'm going to run down there and say hi to them and just say, hey, sorry I'm late, but I was doing a WP-Tonic show with great WordPress experts.
And as soon as I get the notice, I will send it to you, Bill.
I cracked up last time I was down there. One last thing. I got to do one last thing before I leave. Last time we do the show usually an hour earlier, so I get down there a half hour earlier and playing around talking to folks. And the newbies, I'm saying the newbies should be listening to the show last month. Whatever the show was last month, it was a perfect show for the newbies. People that are asking questions of people here where they could get the questions from the very top experts on WordPress. So anyway, I'll let you guys go.
Thanks, Bill.
Awesome.
So I like to hit off with a non-technical question. You said something that really triggered something in me, actually, Anca, and it was about when you're really learning, you got to make mistakes.
Absolutely.
But this is just observation, and I just want to get your feedback. I think our education system is about you get punished for making mistakes. Like if you make mistakes in an exam, you get a bad grade, or if you make mistakes during a kind of mixed exam of practical work. So students learn to become very fearful of mistakes. And I think that goes on into their early adult life. And I think that's maybe one of the problems. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's a really good observation. The thing with a lot of crafts that you do, when you're building the thing, you kind of see it coming together and it works, and it's a step by step. So if you're building a car, you're trained. Here's the thing where you put the thing and you plug it in and it works. When you're doing programming, or when you're making something new, when you're designing, when you're programming, the thing does not work until it does. And so as a programmer, like 90% of it is like frustration and 10% of it is, oh my God, this is amazing. I can't believe I just did that. And so...
and then don't make that. You don't say that to the client because they get so worried when it's so much the reality, isn't it?
Well, that's why I like to show them, like, hey, look, I pushed this button and wow, the screen is white. Okay, that's not a problem. Let's try this. When I was first learning, I'm like, oh, this is horrible. Why don't I know this? And it's like so hard, and like there's documentation and all of this. But really, like and the whole educational system, when you're building something new and you're inventing, when you're exploring, you're going to screw up a lot. And so you have to, encourage people that, yes, you're trying really hard and maybe it's not working just yet, but keep going because you have to keep going.
Yeah, it's a kind of linked follow, and then we get on some more hardcore tech. Is Geoff Soman? His book, The Dip.
Yeah.
And I've kind of, I'm not going to go into all the personal reasons, but reflecting on my own learning new skills, I think I didn't realise that everybody, when you're initially learning something, it's easy, you make really good progress, and then you go down into the dip, and then it gets the grind, and then you got to work, and then you arise again. A lot of people give up when they're in the dip part. Have you got any tips or reflections about, do you agree with what Seth outlined in the dip? And secondly, have you got any reflections and tips about how people deal with that?
Well, I totally agree with that. I've seen it. Absolutely. I've seen it happen. I mean, I experience it. I'm like, I mastered this, and then, but I haven't. So it's definitely a problem. And I think that, again, the thing that keeps you pushing through is either you have this inborn determination that you refuse to stop until you're done. Most people don't have that. The other thing you can do is just be encouraging. So you see somebody kind of plateauing and getting to the point where they're not making as much progress and they start feeling disappointed. You have to stop and look and see how far you've come when you're there. So you see, 2 months ago I didn't know what database was, and now I do, but I'm stuck, but I've come a long way. So it's a matter of shifting your perspective. When you're stuck, you have to look back and see how far you've come, because then you know that, yes, you've made progress and you're going to keep making progress. It's just that it won't be as noticeable until you compare it to something further back. So, just reflect on how far you've come, and then you can keep moving forward.
Yeah, the other thing is, you look at some job specific, and I think the actual situation over the past 2 years has actually might have got a little bit worse. And what I mean by that, the actual expectation of what a full stack developer should be. When you look at some of these job specification, well, we want you fluid in these 4 or 5 languages. Plus, if you could do this would be great. Plus, if you could do that would be great. Plus, we got another 5 things. If you could do them really well, that would be even nicer. Do you think I'm being a little bit my own mindset, or do you think that that's become a slightly bigger kind of problem, if that's the right term to use?
Well, I think it has, because we have a lot more technologies. So the list of like alphabet soup is just bigger and bigger and bigger. But I think that there's also kind of this notion that a technical person is magical somehow, that, once you have your programmer, your business is going to make money. And there's many, many steps in between. And so as a technical person, as a programmer, I kind of, again, like, why are you looking for this particular thing? What does your system do? Why do you need someone who knows 17 things? Sometimes HR people don't really know how to hire, and especially with a smaller organization or somebody that doesn't have experience building things that are technical. They're going to get into a situation where, if we just say we need someone with 10 years of experience in Node.js, which was not around 10 years ago, like maybe we'll sound smarter. We'll find this like super rock star ninja, whatever. So I think there's a lot of on the tech developer side, there's a lot of insecurity and fear about applying for a job where you're not really sure that you're qualified. But some of the time that job description doesn't really make sense for the kind of person the company's looking for. So if it seems unreasonable, like, don't apply for it, because they may not know what they're looking for. But if you're, thinking that maybe this whole list of technical things, maybe you don't know all of them, you should still try, because sometimes when somebody is a smart interviewer, they're looking for somebody who's technical, who can solve problems, not necessarily who can recite exactly how to write a function. So, if you're a developer, you know how to solve certain kinds of problems, and you have a really good imagination, and you can think through a lot of things, and that's what somebody's really looking for in a tech interview.
Yeah, because my own skills, I'm pretty handy on the CS. I've built WordPress themes. I'm pretty good on the functions. I was actually thinking, maybe, do you do any kind of courses around Genesis?
Yeah.
Because I was always a little bit sniffy about Genesis, but I've warmed to it a bit more, and I like to get really delve into it, because I like to keep my hand in. I'm running 2 companies now, and I'm more of a business owner more than anything. But I do like my tech, and I love WordPress. I love the word. I know it's a bit cliche, but I just love the WordPress community.
Yeah.
They're not all great people, but majority are pretty decent people. Get back to the techie side. When I first got into web development, it was through Flash, actually, and I got into a bit of programming through Action Scripting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember buying this really very large red book about JavaScript, and it was about that big. And it was about half the struggle was trying to get your JavaScript to consistently work in different DOM structures. And I remembered it was written by one person. It wasn't one of these rock books that's written by 6 different people that are a total mess normally. This had one writer. But I remember half the book was about how to deal with the inconsistencies of the DOM structures of different browsers. Mm-hmm. And the extra code you had. And I thought this is just crazy stuff, and I gave up on it. And JavaScript looked like it was a past language that was never and there was a lot in the programming community that really stuck their nose up at JavaScript, wasn't it?
Yes.
So it's amazing how it now looks like it might become one of the most dominant technologies of web development for the next 5 to 6 years at least. Have you been surprised about that?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I used to look down my nose at JavaScript developers. I'm like, why can't you just do this in Java? But and that was like, whatever, 10 years ago. But I think one of the things that JavaScript is really cool is that it's easy for people to start. Just like the reason why WordPress is now 25% of websites is that it's easy to get started. With a lot of other programming languages, you have to kind of have a massive amount of infrastructure to be able to really get that first thing, that little first hit of success. And with JavaScript, it's like you take a web page and you can change it just like that. And you don't have to install anything. You write a text file and you put it in the right place on your computer, and boom. So I think it's been really, really great. And the people who worked on jQuery solved a lot of these like weird intra-browser issues, and they created this library that made it much, much, much easier for people to get into JavaScript. So you don't have to understand the difference between Internet Explorer and Chrome and Firefox and Safari and Opera and blah, blah, blah. If jQuery works on these systems, you just use jQuery. So, people are very committed to having JavaScript and having it work. So just like HTML and CSS, just the sheer weight of the number of people using it means that even though it's not a perfect solution, it works well enough for most things.
I'm going to ask you a question here, and there's a few podcasts and a few blogs that I read about JavaScript, and I'm no way. And I don't plan. I think Genesis, I like to get back into theming. It's the front end, the theme, the design side that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I want to to make plugins. It's probably a side that it was the front end that I always enjoyed. The creative side of it in some way. I'm not saying making a plugin isn't creative either. But there's a few podcasts and a few JavaScript blogs. They say you must learn JavaScript in the raw before you go to one of these libraries. And I see where they're coming from, and I would normally agree with that. But after my experience I'm trying to think when it was in the early 2000s, I'm not too sure going back to raw JavaScript is a really good idea, because then you got all this problems with dealing with the DOM structures, and it was the libraries that came up like jQuery that kind of kind of infused blood back into JavaScript, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. So, it's like, if you like fish, sushi is like advanced fish. Before you eat it raw, you want to eat it cooked, so you understand like whether you want, you like it or if your body likes it. So, I mean, jQuery is really, really, really good, and you don't need to learn JavaScript unless you need to, like if your project requires it, or if you want to win an argument with an elitist programmer. So it depends on if you want those kinds of things, and you don't need it if you're happy with what you're doing and jQuery lets you do all the creative things that you want. At some point, you may want to build an application, and at that point, you're not going to go to raw JavaScript. You're going to go to some other framework like Angular or React that kind of models certain things that are not really browser specific, but more like interactive application specific, like events and things like that. So I would say that, you don't need to learn all there is to know about JavaScript to be able to do what you need to do. Don't listen to people who say that, oh, if you don't know JavaScript, you're not a real programmer or whatever. There's no standards for what a real programmer is. So
I think in this specific one, my experience with raw JavaScript and the total inability to, apart from some minor kind of showy stuff, to get it consistently to work with any cross-browser DOM situation. I really don't agree with those statements, but you're in a much better position than me. So I thought I'd ask you that. Now, obviously jQuery is, around front-end manipulation of data. And then we had these other frameworks. And one of the things I was going to ask you, is that there seems to be a new JavaScript framework almost every week. Somebody produces some, and then on Smashing Magazine, somebody writes up, this is the in thing you got to know. And everybody jumps and wastes a load of time. And because everybody's worried about not being in the next big thing, aren't they, to some extent?
Like FOMO, fear of missing out or something like that.
Now, which of the, I think you've named some, but are there like 2 to 3 frameworks, JavaScript frameworks you really like? And could you quickly kind of give us a picture of what you think they're really good at and their strengths and weaknesses? Would that be possible?
Well, I am not a JavaScript framework expert. I am learning my JavaScript framework. So from a high level, there's a few that I've looked at. So there's Backbone, which is used in WordPress for the media library, and that's primarily a display framework. So it makes it easier for you to display and handle interactions with the content. And then the other two that are really popular are Angular.js and React. Angular.js is a framework that's supported by Google, and it's used on a lot of Google applications. And React as well are things that you can use to build like full-on applications that have a display. They have event handling for for dealing with clicks and drags and whatever. They have a way of displaying controls like buttons or checkboxes or calendars and things like that. So the way that they do it is slightly different. The React framework, it seems much more focused on making it very easy to create things that show up on the screen, like boxes that have content in them. And Angular seems like a lot more about creating applications that have logic and flow.
Can I ask? Oh,
Yeah.
goodness, my echo. Oh, let's hope it can die down. Can you hear me, actually?
Yeah, I can. Yes.
Yeah, I'm getting a bit funny. Basically, the reason I butted in Angular, which is the Google, the thing I was going to ask you, it's like Python. I have no experience of Python at all. And the only people I know that learn Python are ones that want to get a job with Google. If you want to get a job with Google, you've got to learn how to program in Python because that's what they use. Is Angular a bit like that? Or,
I would say Angular is a framework and Python is a language. So Python is a whole different thing. It's like really more about scripting and building like back-end stuff. It's also really useful if you want to go in science. A lot of scientific applications are being built in Python now. And so, I mean, it helps. But Angular, it's more like, I don't know if you ever built anything. Well, you used Flash. So, I mean, Angular gives you a tool set, just like the Flash application gives you a tool set for building certain kinds of things. Now, most of what Angular gives you is code. It's not visual. It's not like draggy, droppy kind of stuff. But it's really more about, building things that interact with other things, both on the screen and in a database. Whereas Python is you can do anything with it. And there's Python frameworks. There's one called Django, and there's one called Flask that allow you to build applications. So they have things like user logins and content types and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Another thing, because I think I've got to point out to folks the reason, and I want to see if you agree with this. The reason why this is important, folks, is the reason why JavaScript. The other reason why JavaScript has become more fundamental is it does it on the front end, and it's not calling the server. It can do some of the computerization in the actual browser without making a call back to the server. And the reason why, folks, that is important is especially on mobile devices where the bandwidth can be restrictive and you want a smooth interface that you would expect on your laptop. You want it on your mobile device. And one of the ways of dealing with that is actually doing some of the data processing on the front end and not at the back end. Was my explanation decent?
Yeah, absolutely. That's huge. So, I mean, if your server doesn't have to also compose all of the HTML in your page, if all it sends over is like a little pack of like post content and the fields, and then you display it on your site, it saves on server processing time. It saves on data transfer because instead of sending 100K of HTML, and some people send more, you might send 200 bytes of text, which is super fast. And so you're saving people's like data plans when you're not downloading these huge files back and forth. You're making it like things react faster when you can see things on your own screen. So I mean, it's fabulous. Yeah.
What about the actual development tools for JavaScript? I understand they've got a little bit better, but they're not maybe as mature as maybe some more I would say more traditional languages or languages that have been around. What's the situation around that area?
Well, most people who develop JavaScript, there aren't like as many IDE, like the integrated development environments that you can use. There's some plugins for Eclipse, I think, that help. Most people use
Sublime.
Sublime text, like these text editors, and then they use a lot of scripts on their computers. They have.
What about Storm? Is that? I know a few people that do a lot of hardcore plugging that using Storm, and they swear by it, but I haven't used it that much.
I haven't either. I do most of my programming in BB Edit.
Yeah, I still use it. I use Sublime and BB Edit actually.
Yeah.
I learned in BB Edit, and if I'm doing something small, it's just easier to do it in BB Edit. Yeah. So you're really hardcore, aren't you? So one of the other, I talked to a lot of other developers that are in the Drupal world or full stack, and when I mention WordPress, I get this kind of sniffy look in their eyes, and they go a bit white, and they say, I never want to develop in WordPress again. It's spaghetti code. It's horrible. It's not real. And they say things like, it's not real programming, and it's not real web development. I think that's really unfair, but is there any basis in those remarks, or do you think that's a little bit self-delusionary? But you do hear that a lot, though. So where do you think that comes from?
Well, that comes from two places. One is the original WordPress core. I mean, it grew over time. It was not written by somebody who was an engineer. It was written by a whole bunch of people who are just learning how to do a lot of things. And so there is some basis for like the WordPress core, being a little bit disorganized and not pristine and perfect and all of that stuff. And I have a rude gesture I'm making off screen to those people who say no. Because has definitely changed. And I would say that, if you look at the ability for people to upgrade WordPress, you can take a WordPress 2.5 website and install WordPress 4.4.1, and your content will show up on your website. You try that with Drupal 6 and 7 and 8, and it is not easy. The other place where the spaghetti code comes from, and this is completely accurate, is the fact that the plugins and themes that add the functionality that people want into WordPress, a lot of them were not written and are not being written by professional developers and people who understand programming and who understand a lot of what they're doing. But that's okay. There are lots and lots of really, really solid plugins and themes. WooCommerce is super solid. It's huge. There's a lot to it, but
it's got a bit of a reputation. I haven't done it was about a year ago, and 14 months ago when I did my last WooCommerce customization job. And it was all right when you did a good read up and you really delved into it, but but they all have. I've never found it. No, Shopify uses its own scripting language, but it's based on, I think, is it Ruby on Python? I think
it's Ruby.
Yeah. Well, that's got its peculiarities. They all have, don't they?
They do. And I mean, people who are programming snobs will knock WordPress because, oh my God, it's PHP, and it's like, PHP is for babies. But
well, what do you
argue with success? You can't argue. Like, HTML is like a hack on top of another hack on top of other hacks, and yet somehow we managed to make it work. So I just, we're not trying to send people to Mars using our WordPress websites. We're trying to build things quickly and iteratively and to adjust them and change them very, very quickly. And, I am willing to make bets with people about how fast you can make something in WordPress versus custom, and then 6 months later, add a major feature to that same code base with a completely different developer and see how fast you get it done in WordPress versus something else.
Yeah. I've got two other quick questions, and then see how we're going, how you're feeling about keep on going. Basically, one's observation, which I would like your kind of response. And the observation is, I run a kind of maintenance hosting company. Mm-hmm. That's my main income, and some of the worst problems we have with themes and everything is, funny enough, around JavaScript and about how it's not been, how plugin developers? Well, there's three parts. There's three kind of questions. So maybe you can give any kind of insights why that is. Secondly, I found some of the most really fantastic programmers like Pippin Williamson and others. There's some really, I think they're world-class developers in the WordPress community. I think they would be on the top of the heap of any. And that's interesting when people say it's spaghetti, but I feel it's got some of the best developers in the web development community in WordPress. And thirdly, I'm really excited about PH7 because it looks like it's going to really get some really massive performance gains. So I've just thrown three questions at you. How would you like to respond?
Oh my God. Well, yeah. So, I mean, the WordPress community, well, first of all, there's just no standard for what a good programmer is. Like there's a doctor, you have to get certified and licensed. So you can sort of say, yes, this person has a license, they're a doctor. But with programming, we don't have that. So it's really more about like experience and practice and skill and thoughtfulness. And yeah, I mean, I also have wind up supporting people or helping people resolve issues with themes where the issue is with JavaScript.
It does seem to be a regular problem. Is it just a knowledge-based problem?
It's a knowledge-based problem. It's also because JavaScript interacts on the client, there's a lot more opportunities for things to go wrong and things to interact in a weird way. So you have to be a lot more careful with JavaScript, making sure you have the right versions, making sure that you're not, overwriting something else. And JavaScript is also where a lot of the security errors come because people allow their JavaScript functionality on a plugin or a theme to do things in the database that maybe they're not really sure how to do it correctly. So JavaScript is definitely like a place where there's some concerns. And I would say, when you're buying plugins or themes off of a website like ThemeForest or anywhere else, you have to be aware that the more complicated and interesting features, the drag and drop stuff, all of that stuff is fairly complicated and has not been fully developed. So you're going to wind up in a situation where you're using only half working code. And that's fine because, again, you just install the update and after that it's fine. But you can't, like with WordPress, and we've done a bad job, I think, as a community of saying WordPress is easy and it's maintainable, but yet at the same time, when you install WordPress, you have to kind of pay attention to it unless you hire someone to help you with the maintenance because it is changing.
That's what we get when we get people coming to us because they've done the gauntlet and they've learned the hard way. But, I say to them, don't get too angry because it's still a fantastic you got a lot of that, a few years ago to get what you're getting through WordPress. You couldn't even, if you're a small, a medium, or even a slightly larger company, you couldn't even think about it because the development costs would have been astronomical, wouldn't they?
Yeah, well, if you want to put a slideshow on your homepage, for example, 15 years ago, you have to hire a pretty hardcore programmer to help you build the administrative part and to deploy it. Now you can install one of hundreds of plugins and keep cycling through them until you find one that works. And that may cost you like 3 or 4 hours.
Would you also agree, like Pippin Williams, what's his name? The Chief Technology Officer, Optimonster. He was on my show. He's a fantastic developer.
Yeah, Pippin.
And then you got Pippin Williams. And is it Griffiths, who's the Chief Technology Officer of Optimonster? He came on the show. He's a fantastic developer. There does seem to be some really top-notch developer programmers in the world.
Absolutely.
Really diamondite people in there. And I think when you get those kind of quality of individuals, it shows you that there's something really going on in the WordPress community, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that, the core team, Andrew Nason, those guys, like they're advancing PHP. The things that WordPress is doing is actually driving the development of the language that we use, PHP. So it's influencing it at all different levels. But WordPress does not require somebody to be like the super high-end programmer to be able to use it. And that's where it becomes amazing.
Or make a good living as a developer if they just want to specialize in one area.
Yeah, so everyone is welcome in the WordPress community, which means that everyone can be learning something new and advancing their career every time they use it. So you've got people who are world class and they can have any job they want and they're building WordPress stuff instead, and that's the job they want. And you have people who are just barely learning about what a website is, and they're all included in this thing that we're all in together.
Good.
People who will help the super experienced person will help somebody who's knows a little bit less than them. They might help a total newbie. And I see it over and over in the WordPress community. People are extremely giving and they're always willing to learn something.
Now, what do you think about PH7? Because I went to a couple of the last WordCamp I went to was in Sacramento. Yeah. I don't think you
I was there. I was in there.
We should have. I'm sorry to have missed you. But I went to a couple of presentations. I think it was one of their chief engineers from WP Engine.
Yeah.
And they were talking about the performance gains that are going to be achieved with PH. And it sounded really exciting. And what was your feelings about PH7?
I haven't really played too much with it, but I'm looking forward to in the next couple of months. I'm redesigning the Liminal website, so that kind of takes up a lot of time. But I plan on using PHP 7, converting a bunch of my sites to it. We're probably going to do it with the conference management site that I helped build, and that that has hundreds of thousands of visitors and thousands of admins putting their events in there and stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to having some performance gains from that. And I think the fact that WP Engine makes it really, really hard to upgrade is great. I mean, really easy to upgrade. Oh my god! Sorry, guys. Great. I think we're going to have some problems in 18 months as some of the slower hosts aren't doing those upgrades and people are writing plugins and themes that take advantage of PHP 7 stuff that is not available in PHP 5 point whatever. And I think a lot of people are going to have to move their WordPress hosting somewhere else, or all the hosting providers have to continue doing their upgrades. So I think it's in one way it's kind of annoying because it means you have to do a lot of work, but in the other end it's kind of great because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So
yeah, but I think the performance gain, it is what it is, isn't it? I think it's going to be what I was listening to. Obviously, it was coming from WP Engine, and they are planning to be on the forefront probably of that change. But it is what it is. But I think, but it should. Do you want? Have you got time for a couple more questions?
Yeah, I've got until about 7:15.
Yeah, say when you heard enough. But you've been a great champ. I've really enjoyed this discussion so far. We've had a good techno feast, haven't we?
Oh yeah, this is fantastic. Thank you.
I can talk tech until I drop, really.
Drop.
That's great. Now, I was going to. This is not exactly a technical question, but you're a really smart lady and you're well embedded in the WordPress community. I didn't attend WordCamp USA. I couldn't afford it. I just didn't fancy freezing to death, quite truthful. But I understand from a few people that when it was quite mild. But I was surprised when Matt said that the last quarter of 2016, he's going to be the head of the core development. Do you really think it's a really hard one to call? Because I understand he wants to prove that he can still do it and he's still got the development chumps. But as the CEO of not only the foundation but of a pretty large now commercial company, do you think he should really be doing it?
Well, I don't know. It really depends on what else he's got going on. If Jack can be the CEO of Twitter and Square, who knows what's possible. But no, I think that the WordPress development process and all of that stuff, it's a team effort. I'm sure that there's a lot of work involved. And I would hope that can manage his time or have people that he can work with to manage his time. And I can totally believe that being the development lead for WordPress can be more fun than being a CEO some of the time. So, more power to him. I think that it's great that he really wants to stay involved, and all of the spirit and passion that he puts towards open source and making all of this stuff as accessible as possible is tremendously important. And if he stays in the trenches and he knows how to work WordPress and develop WordPress, it's going to be a better product for all of us.
I'm very impressed with that answer. I'll give you 5 out of 5 for that. That was really, truly diplomatic. I'm gassed. You get top marks for that answer. I can tell you've been working on board level for a while, because that was pure diplomacy. That was. And I don't mean that sarcastically. I was really quite impressed with that reply. This finished with a couple of tech things. We're on safer ground, aren't we? So I get a lot of people that get very frustrated with WordPress. They're business owners. They buy a theme and they say, I just want to move this around. I want to move this section over here. And I thought that was what I was buying in with WordPress, right? And what?
Someone just wanted to talk to me. I'm like, no, not right now. But
and they get frustrated because they can't move this bit over or this other bit over there, or change that bit. And you got Wix, you got Weebly, and you even hear this, they expect more from WordPress.com. Obviously, we've had some, with Beaver Builder and a couple of others. Do you think that WordPress.com has got to provide more of a kind of visual editor to really keep WordPress growing, or do you think that might be a mistake, actually?
Nope, I think that is a mistake. I think that there's a tremendous value to what Wix and Squarespace and all of these other sites provide, which is the ability to make every single page look different. But that's power, but then also responsibility, because every time you want to make a change, you have to touch every single page. I think WordPress as a content management and publishing system offers a huge amount of power. And it's like somebody buying a Fiat, imagining that it's a Lamborghini, and then being mad because they can't add a spoiler to it that comes from a Lamborghini. It's sort of like a WordPress theme and plugins and designing your WordPress website kind of creates a specific container for the information and the content about your business. And what the power that WordPress provides is that you own your data. You can rearrange these things, but you can't do it just willy-nilly. You have to sort of think through it a little bit. And if you want to be able to change the kinds of content that's on your homepage, you need to get a theme that has that part of it built in. But you can't just you can't get the ability to have hundreds of thousands of people accessing or editing or using your website while also being able to touch and manage every single individual snowflake, like a page like a snowflake. So I think it would be a mistake. That's not what WordPress is about. WordPress is about content management and sharing data across multiple hundreds of websites. And that is so much more beyond drag and drop that it's like, comparing a nuclear weapon to a hammer.
Yeah, I do agree, but I know where the other people are coming from. But I've observed I've not done that much client work for the past year because I've been building this SaaS product, and I've been trying to build up WP-Tonic, the podcast, and promoting my maintenance company and doing all the things that are involved with that. But when I was really doing a lot of development, and sometimes for agencies and sometimes working with clients directly, I came to the conclusion that they wanted to do that because they really consciously and subconsciously wanted to avoid actually producing content.
Yes. Yeah.
And producing content is hard graft.
Yep.
I was really very critical, but producing my own content for WP-Tonic and for my other company, I don't enjoy it myself, but I make myself do it because that's the only way I'm going to build my business up. But I think they want all to move stuff around because it makes them think they're doing something without having to do the thing which they really, really don't want to do.
I wrote like 2 plugins instead of writing 1 content page. So like, I hear it. But it's not, don't turn your content problem into a technical problem, because when you solve the technical problem, you still have a content problem. So yeah. And I tell people that, and they sort of don't hear it.
No, they don't want to hear it. See, it's a bit like Bill. Bill's a great guy and he's a great sound engineer, he really, he's building online business and that's about content.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he's not, we're all in that same boat. And I used to be very critical because obviously it was costing me money. You end up, but you can't, in the end, you've got to really look at yourself because there are methodologies that you can, get most of the money up front, have actual communication processes that are automated to some extent, be realistic, don't beat yourself down on price, having some money in the bank so you're not desperate all the time, these type of things. But clients really, really, because it is really tough to produce good content, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, and there's people who do a great job at it, and we should hire them to help us.
But they're expensive, they got just the same, aren't they? And people, I have had clients that obviously did have the money and they just didn't want to spend it. But then I've had other clients that just didn't have the money. But I think it is content production. And what I mean by content production, folks, is not just written content. It's graphics, video, everything that now makes a modern website. It's got a lot more complicated when it has towards content. When you're consulting clients, how do you deal? It is a touchy subject, isn't it? Have you insights when you are consulting companies, how you deal with that?
Well, so I have a little bit of an advantage because I've been burned a lot. So, I started out as a very technical person, and I got on these projects where like, oh, they hired a technical person. They must be looking for a technical solution. And it took me a little while to kind of figure out that really, like, I should put down the mouse and the keyboard and really talk to people and figure out what they really needed and what thing that we needed to build would get them to what they needed. And so with WordPress, and now I'm like old enough now, I don't give a shit. I'm like, you don't have your content, this is not going to work. I just tell people straight out because it's not going to work. People can't, they can't hire me to build them this set of things if they don't have all the stuff that's going to go in those boxes.
Well, they say, and I used to believe it, they say, well, we can't write the content until we actually see the site. And I say, no, you write tons of stuff and we cut it down to about 50% to a third of it, because probably you will overwrite naturally. This isn't the printed medium, and people skim read. So we're probably going to only use the third. They look at you and they say, well, they just don't realize it, but that is the truth. Long-winded bits have their place, but normally as you go deeper into the site. But you normally, whatever you produce, you're going to cut it quite considerably. So there's no problem. But that you hear that regularly. We can't do it until we see it.
Well, and that makes sense. I would say, you know, when you're building like the first version of the design, sure, you want to like, you know, maybe you, I mean, this is, you'd even do it in Photoshop or something where you're not really programming. You design something, you figure out what's the size of the content. Can you really describe your business in 3 bullet points because you're looking at a design that requires 3 bullet points, not 8 paragraphs? You know, can you produce photography that looks good? If you want a website, if you look at a design and you're like, I really love this thing with humongous, beautiful photos of products, but yet your product is not something that can be photographed, or you don't have a photo, like all of these things like interrelate. So designers have kind of more of an advantage because they're, you know, they can produce some of this stuff. But my husband's a graphic designer. And, you know, he designs websites, and there are websites that he's designed where the image that he picked from iStock Photo is still on the website the day the site is launched because they have not decided what to replace it with. And you know, he does like high-end websites where people like, there's people who care about these things, and even there, like they don't. It's always the content. It's really challenging. And like if you're a developer and you have a client and you notice that, for example, and this happened to me last year, and I didn't take this into account. Next year I will, where it turned out the client had to produce about 5,000 photographs for their products. So we had this like, I scoped out this like 6 to 8 week development process, and we got our development done, but then it took them another 4 or 5 months to actually shoot all these photographs because they had to like take product, drive it somewhere, unpack it, set it up, and then photograph it. And that's not easy to do when like you're dealing with huge things. And so we wound up spending a lot more time like every week or every couple of weeks checking in. How's it going? Does it work? Oh my gosh, look, now we have half our photos in and there's some performance issues. So now we need to resolve those. So those kinds of projects where like there's a massive amount of content that has to be generated, you can take longer to do the development, but you have to sort of keep in touch with your client because they still need that motivation. And
that hand-holding has to be paid for.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're not going to be able to think about or test like user login stuff or, you know, things like that because they're not seeing their content on their website. And so like they're freaking out about these photos and we're like, well, we need you to sign off on like the intranet parts of the site, and they're like, I don't care, I need to like, you know, take these photos. And you just have to time that. The project is not technical. It's not a technical project.
You also see a lot of inexperienced developers, and I call it the 2-year burnout level. They do freelancing for about 2 years, and then they take on much too much work at too low a rate, and then they burn out.
Yeah.
And then they look to work for the man or the woman in a cubicle, and they never want to become a freelancer again because they're burnt out. They're totally mentally burnt out from it. Is that something you observed as well?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, developers are optimists. We always think we can get things done faster than it actually turns out to be. And so when you're a freelancer and you don't have this sort of structure, it's really easy to kind of set a trap for yourself where you're like, oh, this will only take 6 weeks. And then, oh my God, it's like actually 8 months. And, you know, they don't have, their budget doesn't include paying me for 6 months while I sit around and wait. So I got to, you know, do something else. So freelancing is a challenge because you have to really understand the scope of what you're doing, sell yourself correctly, you know, do all the follow-up, the billing and calling them and getting your money. So, yeah, I mean, it's.
I think one of the ways to cope, wish I had done it, or in a way I am, because I just maintenance and small jobs, and I have a team that work for me. And we do, and my other business, we specialise in one particular I think specialisation in some ways can help you if you just specialise in one bit, one part, or one industry, or something, you know, where it's more, you're more aware of what you're dealing with on a weekly, monthly basis, because general web projects, I've never found one that is totally the same as other, really.
Yeah. Well, web projects reflect the pathology of the organization that's doing the project.
Yeah.
So every time you do a project, like it's a new kind of organization, and they can be fairly complicated because they involve human beings. So the more you specialize, like if you're the one person who knows how to do this thing with like SSL and security and WordPress, you may only need to do it 5 or 6 times a year and just charge a lot. And the person who hires you is someone who deals with all the complexity of managing the project and the humans. But when you're a freelancer and you're like, I'm going to go build WordPress websites, you're taking on all of that complexity of understanding the client's business, making sure they understand what they're doing and how they're setting it up. So it's overwhelming. And people they get angry because their clients don't get what they're trying to do. And the clients get angry because the developer is like, doesn't hear them. And so, it's the communication part of being a freelancer and doing complex projects is not something that you think about when you're like, I'm going to freelance. So, yeah.
I think we're finished now, but I think we've had a good techno bash of this, haven't we?
I would love to do this anytime. But yeah,
it's been a great sport. I think, folks, you listen to the podcast and you come over to YouTube. I think we've offered some great. Anca, you're a great sport, a great ambassador to the WordPress community. If you're interested in training, please go to Anca's website and try out a centre. I probably will be. I'm having a chat with Anca tomorrow, and part of it will be probably doing some training with her. And her centre and herself has one of the highest reputation in the Bay Area. And I would personally advise you, if you are looking for training, look at her centre and her. So,
thank you.
I do mean that, actually, Anca. You're a great person and you've got a great reputation.
Right. So I just posted a link to our website in the chat and in the questions. New version coming soon. It is way more awesome, way more Genesis. This one,
way more Genesis. One of the great things about this is when it's turned into YouTube, this bit shows up, and also Bill utilizes the Blab version and places it on some of his websites that has the full questions. Unfortunately, folks, I'm a man, so I'm not multitask, and I rely on Bill to look at the kind of question section, and I just focus on what Anca has been saying because it's been so interesting. So you probably have posted some stuff, and I haven't been looking at it, but I'm a man. I can't, like I say, I can't multitask. It's one job at a time. I have my list every day. Every week, every month, and I just plod through my list. That's how I deal with life, folks.
You gotta do it. You gotta do it. Whatever.
I'm the typical man. I can't multitask. I'm sorry, folks. All right, Anca, we go now. Thanks, folks. It's been a great show, and you've been a great guest, Anca. I really enjoyed the techno feast which we've had.
Yeah, if you want the sarcastic ones, come in person. I'm.
See you later, Anca. Bye.
Bye.
Oops. Okay. Yeah. That's it, folks. Anca's gone off to do some more coding, and hope you enjoyed this show. I'd like to thank my co-host, Bill Conrad. He, like I say, he's a great sound engineer and a great co-host. And I hope you enjoyed this show. I really enjoyed it. Anca's a great ambassador to WordPress. Go and have a look at what she offers on the training side. I know her and her team really care about their students. You don't always get that with some public institutions or private training institutions, but I know Anca, her centre has the highest reputation and she really cares, and so does her team. Next week, we'll be talking about JavaScript. We've got a guest. Unfortunately, I forgot his name. But he was the chief instructor for Treehouse, and he's going to be talking about everything about WordPress and JavaScript, and it should be a fantastic show, and we will be hosting it with my co-host. And please come. See you soon, folks. Bye.